Are we going? Wait. Oh, there we are. Okay, we're gonna get started here. Well, I don't. I wish this camera would behave with me more, but anyway, we're gonna get drawing. Hope y'all are having a great day today. I'm doing pretty good overall. Just you ever have those days where like there's a million different things going on, and you're like, some way, somehow, I'm not going to lose my mind amidst all this chaos. Not that it's been a bad day at all. It hasn't been a bad day. It's been a great day. It's just been really chaotic. It's been kind of a chaotic week. So I kind of figured, why not hang out, do a stream, and we'll have fun, presumably. So I'm just gonna like I said in the description, I'm gonna draw some Legend of Redneck, and I'm just trying to get. It's just one of those days. It's just one of those days. I've been scrambling to get enough time sort of set aside that I could feel comfortable with like doing a stream, because there's a bunch of things I want to fit into my day, like this. Like, I was going to try yoga today, but I don't think it's going to happen today. First of all, because I'm actually very sore. Like, I'm kind of been pushing myself a little too much the last week and a half. Like, I just had Tai Chi class last night, and it's not like, okay, I don't know what it is, but usually when I practice Tai Chi by myself, I don't really burn a sweat that hard. But like in the class, I don't know if it's like the collective chi of the class or something. I don't know. It's really mysterious to me. I burn up a sweat, and it wasn't like it was warm in the gym or anything. It wasn't warm at all. It was pretty temperate. But I was like, whenever I practice Tai Chi in the class, I get super focused, like more focused than I ever do when I'm like practicing by myself. I don't know if that's just because like there's all these people around. I don't know. There's a certain thing that happens like as you learn the form and you're practicing around other people, and they're practicing along with you. You're all kind of practicing together. There is this thing that happens for people who are at sort of like at lower levels of practice. They're going to look at people who they can tell are like, oh, that person knows what they're doing, or they have a better memory of the form or whatever. So you kind of find yourself in this very odd position where you're responsible for the rest of the class. Not necessarily, that's not the right way of putting it. It's not that you're responsible, it's that you kind of have this awareness that other people are watching you, and that it's better that you don't mess up because your mess up might affect them as well, and there's kind of a ripple effect in the class. And so it does create a certain amount of like I don't know what to call it. It's not pressure, because I don't feel pressured to perform. I just feel like this sense of, okay, my mess ups are the class's mess ups and vice versa, right? So anyway, because of all that, the way that I do the form in class is like extra concentrated. And that extra level of concentration like becomes almost like I don't even know what to call it. I guess you burn extra calories or something. Anyway, I always feel like I've done a big workout, even though I haven't. Um, I always kind of have this sense of like, whoa, jeez, like what did I just do? So anyway, that's me today. Maybe there's other things going on, like more subtle influences going on that I can't speak of because I'm not aware. But um, such things are talked about in many Taoist texts. But that's all too mysterious. Anyway, that's all too mysterious and spooky and strange. So for this episode that I'm working on, there's a character that I really like that I just designed who it's funny when I don't know, like it's funny how like some characters just kind of write themselves. And this was one of those instances where it was like, oh, like I didn't have to do really any work. It just like kind of happened. Like it just popped up. And the dynamics of this character sort of came into my mind where it's like uh, a good-natured, wholesome old spider beast, you know. And I even gave him like a little like I don't know why I find this so funny, but it's hilarious to me. I gave him like a cross around his neck, so he's a good Christian spider. He's a good Christian giant spider beast, and he will be showing up in a future episode of the Legend of Redneck. But what happened was when I was designing his character, what I did, and Ishiun says, "Hi, man, love your work." Well, thank you. Thank you, Ishiun. I'm glad you appreciate my work. Feel free to hang out and check out what I'm working on, and we're just gonna hang out. But I was I was doing some like research for this character, right? Because I knew he was gonna be a spider, but like, I mean, I kind of know how to draw a spider, putting heavy rabbit ears around that. But it's much better if you do the like research and do the reference and kind of like draw from some pictures and over the course of like I'll show you real quick what I'm talking about here. Like I have a not a big reference folder, but I have a reference folder, right? And so I was just like looking at pictures of spiders, and like as I was looking at these pictures of particularly jumping spiders, that's not really a good one. The one picture, this one right here, when I was looking at this guy, I was just like, it's like he has a mustache. And I was like, I can work with that. As I was designing this character, I was like, oh, I could see how. There's a character in Spirited Away whose name I cannot remember, but he's also kind of like an old Spider-Man. He's like an old spider spirit, and he like operates the whole hot springs or whatever. He's a really good character. I like him a lot, and I wish I could remember his name, but I cannot right now. Anyway, I could see how they got that. He has a particular like mustache, right? He's kind of like the Dr. Eggman mustache. He even kind of has like a Dr. Eggman look to him. But anyway, I was like, oh, I could see how you could get that by looking at jumping spiders because they all have that like look about them. And so he does have a little bit of that going on. This character who I'm just going to call HR. And you'll have a better look at him as I get to this panel. Right now, this is still in sort of like the rough drawing stage, but it probably gives you a decent idea, right? I don't know how much I'm going to actually do with this character. He's just kind of there right now. He's just like in this episode, and serves a function. But as as happens, right? When I'm writing, I get into these stints where it's like, it's time to like throw in a new dynamic, throw in a new character, like see what happens. And what happens is generally is like some character comes into my mind where I'm like, "Oh, I want to do something with this. I think there's something here." And spiders are fun to draw. That's the other thing. As anybody who showed up for last night's stream, um, the spider character that I drew was largely sort of, how would I put this? Like tangential, right, to this character that I'm working on right now called HR. And it also helped me just like practice and kind of figure out like, okay, this is what it would look like to draw this spider character. These are the kind of poses I could work with. And something that's really fun about drawing that kind of character too is like you can draw him doing things that you can't do like with normal, or not normal, but like with other characters, right? Because a lot of his poses, a lot of his like the way he carries himself, right, is he's largely upside down most of the time. So that's like another. It's also like an interesting kind of compositional tool because most characters they have to like stand up. So the way you think about how you compose a panel, right? I don't know if this is something any of you all are interested in, but nevertheless, I kind of want to take the moment to just show what I'm talking about. Okay, like usually when you're composing a panel, you got like your here's your character. Hi, look at that character. He's so happy, right? And he's like, "Hi, I'm happy." Well, there's only so many different perspectives that you can do that, right? Like you can do close up. You can do like a profile, right? Like, "Hi, I'm happy." This guy is just like really happy. You can do I don't know, you can do like from below, or what they call worm's eye view, right? You can do from above. You can do like a bird's eye view. I don't know if I'm really going to get this across very well, but I'll try. Right? Like, oh my god, I'm happy. But usually, for purposes of like, making things easy, it's usually pretty flat on, right? It's like, here's character A, here's character B. Most comic storytelling usually like boils down into this kind of dynamic. And which means like, everything's like flattened, right? So what is very interesting to me about drawing a character like HR is you might have a character over here and they're happy. I don't know, you have another character right here. Right? Well, it would be very hard to fit in a character right here unless they were like smaller. Which, I mean, you could do. It's not like you couldn't do it. You could totally do it, but you know, you have somebody who hangs from the ceiling. You could do that instead, right? It's just like a fun little compositional trick. I'm a spider. So anyway, that's kind of how I think about some of these things sometimes. I'm not like I'm not necessarily purposefully doing that, but you know, if I come up with a character who has that sort of thing going on, I go, oh, okay, that's like something that I can utilize with writing this character. This is something that is like a I don't know, what would you call it? Like a benefit of the character, essentially. And so I'm excited. I guess that's the point, is I'm excited. And it's a tricky thing because when writing the story, I'm in this position where like how would I put this? Like Link and Hizzard and Judy and Loretta, in my mind, they're like the main characters in the story. And I don't necessarily want to I don't necessarily want to intrude on that and add too many more characters, right? Not to mention the fact that like there's all of like Lank's family, um, who I still want to like do more stuff with them in the future because like there's still more stuff I'd like to do with like Peepaw. Still more stuff I'd like to do with his dad Frank and his mom Diane. So like I have to be careful with how many characters that I add. Though I will say after I take this sip, the thing is, and part of the fun of like writing the story and something that is an advantage of sort of having it set in something like Gandalf's castle, where essentially, you know, I mean, the castle itself is like composed of all these like multitude of dungeons, right? And the dungeons can be, they can basically be whatever I want them to be, right? Um, that means there's a lot of opportunities to like write kind of crazy one-off characters who exist solely as like either they're like a weird foe that Link faces, right? Or they can also just be like a side gag or whatever, right? It's not super important for most of those characters that they continuously exist throughout the story. I've kind of saved that largely for Hizzard, largely for Judy and Loretta. They're the ones who I'm like most committed to. But at the same time, I want to give the sense that like Gandalf's castle has, um, you know, it's this occupied workplace. Like it has a ton of life to it. I guess. I guess that's the word that I'm looking for. Like you know, it has its own life outside of even Gandalf, and that to me is like a very interesting writing opportunity. And so I'm trying to figure out the best ways that I can to illustrate that idea and to like utilize it fully because I'm probably only ever going to do that once and I'll probably only do that for this story. So, there you have it. I don't I thought I had more to say on that matter, but I apparently don't. But yeah, so like HR has like a straw basket on his back that he collects bodies into. So that's going to be a big part of like what I'm calling like Act Two. Heavy rabbit ears. I don't know why I'm using rabbit ears. I mean, it is Act Two of the Legend of Redneck. Like, I really want this act to be a pretty like deep introspection into Ganondorf's castle and like its residents, right? And give an idea of sort of what motivates them, what their spirit is, like the good, the bad, the ugly kind of a thing. So I guess you could say it is a little bit of world building, even though I've in the past stated like, oh, I'm trying to veer away from world building after Trailer Park Warlock. um, because Trailer Park Warlock was just such a buffet of world building. And this one's more of a like, it's more of a 4-course meal. Let's say that. Like, Trailer Park Warlock was like a Golden Corral, and this is more like a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. That's the way I'm thinking of it. I don't know if that's how it's gonna like end up, but that's how I'm thinking about it right now in terms of world building. You're gonna get some good world building. You're gonna get like a little bit of everything that you want, but you're not gonna have like the same kind of overwhelmment that I think that everybody liked in Trailer Park Warlock, but I found myself a little bit belabored by, and I think that I once again, as with this story, I'm only ever going to do that once. I feel like, as much as I enjoy world building, you have to be careful with it because it can really get away with itself. And at a certain point, it's like, oh, I've basically just like I've written the Bible for myself, where I have to like go back and study it and like, remember every little thing, and it's kind of a mess, Um, that being said, there's certainly a lot of opportunities in the future to, like if I ever wanted to go back to Trailer Park Warlock and write more stories in that universe, there are a ton, an absolute smorgasbord of opportunities and ideas that I think would be fun to write. Like, I still think it would be fun to write a like. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up because I don't think this is going to happen. But like, it would be fun, just hypothetically speaking. It would be fun to do like, more of a Ghostbusters style story featuring like Russ's business. So like Russ would be like the hub character. Like he manages the Ghost Trappers business and hires on these people. And I think like the main characters would probably be like the people he hires to work for him. And so he's sort of more in the background, and you get more of him and sort of like the old cast of Trailer Park Warlock. They're sort of in the background, but largely it follows these other characters who are like, working for us basically. That's an idea that I've had in the back of my head as just like, maybe one day. But like I said, I have a hard time imagining that happening right now. There's a lot of things that would have to change, both in terms of my own like, just in terms of like all the red tape right now that I'm dealing with Webtoon. But who knows? Things can change. I could be very surprised by like what happens in the future. But for now, I'm kind of like, okay, Legend of Redneck is my work to focus on, right? And then My nose is itchy. I'm sorry. And then go from there, right? Because there's like another story I want to work on that I've been just spitballing the story for a while, and I haven't quite gotten to exactly what I want. Because originally, so Loretta was originally from a story idea that the working title for it was called Backroads Coffee House. I don't think that's going to happen. It might end up being some other thing. And the idea at the time when I was designing Loretta, I thought that Loretta was going to be like a coffee shop manager. Because I was really, like, her character was largely inspired by this barista I saw at a coffee shop in Spring, Texas. I was just like on vacation. I was just like hanging out in Spring, Texas. I don't even remember why. And I saw this lady, was probably in let's speculate, probably in early 20s, mid 20s, something like that. And she was basically like wearing what Loretta wears when she's at home, which was just like basically a giant, like, kind of punky band t-shirt as a dress, and then like boots. And I was like, wow, that is like a look, and that really inspired me for the character of Loretta. It kind of gave me ideas of like, okay, there's something to this person as a like would make a great character to write. And I just started really, I don't know, what would you say, like just doodling away ideas and sort of getting to a point where it was like, okay, I think I have a character to work with here. And the character that ended up like coming out of that, right, was the Loretta, from the Legend of Redneck. Because, like I said, originally she had kind of a different personality. And I think what changed for me was largely necessity. I needed somebody to play off of Judy as a character because, initially when I was writing Judy, I didn't really think much about her, and then I hit this point pretty quickly. I was like, okay, I'm going to do something with this character. I don't know fully yet. And so as I was writing Judy's character, Loretta became very necessary because there was this necessity to have somebody to play off of who can play off of Judy's, like, what would you call, like, I'm having a hard time with words. I'm going to take a sip of water. Bubbliness. Right? Judy has a certain amount of bubbliness to her, and so it would be useful to have a character, or let's say sweet, right? Maybe this is a much better analogy. Judy's sweetness can be played off with somebody who's very salty, hence Loretta. Or even bitter, maybe. But you get my point. Like, you have a character who's one thing and you have another character who's another thing, and those dynamics can play off of each other, and that helps create kind of I say kind of. I mean, it helps create a dynamic, and that dynamic is what then allows the story to sort of have its own life. I don't really remember what brought me into thinking about all that. So it became quickly apparent to me that as I was enjoying writing Judy and Loretta's story, that I think it moved sort of the heart of the story of Legend of Redneck, because originally when I was writing Legend of Redneck, and maybe I've already talked about this before, but why the hell not talk about it again, I guess. Especially because as I think about it, it evolves a little bit too. As I was writing The Legend of Redneck, kind of originally, the story in my mind was going to be more of a Sunday Funnies comic strip, in the sense of there's no real overarching storyline. It's just kind of like thing happens, then thing happens, then thing happens, and it's all kind of not associated with each other. But I found after a while that that was going to get boring really fast. And I didn't want to do like, I don't know, I didn't want to do like 72, because originally that was my idea, was I was going to do 72 episodes, and it's evolving into like 150 episodes. I didn't want to do 72 episodes of just like random video game inspired gag strips. I felt like that would be really boring really fast. And I am kind of wondering if, like, as a writer, and maybe I just need to work on this, but like maybe as a writer, I'm not really like a gag strip artist. There are writers who are like, that is their thing and they're very good at it, and they do a very good job of sort of like, you know, the analogy I'm looking for is like, they just go to the batter's box and they just swing away. You know, they're gonna miss sometimes, but like that doesn't really bother them. You know, they just keep going. And I love writing good gags, and certainly that features into how I write The Legend of Redneck. But I don't think that that's the only thing that motivates me to write, right? Like, there are other things that motivate me to write. I really like coming up with interesting characters. I really like writing a story that has like some emotional density to it. I don't know what the proper that I'll use that term, emotional density. Um, in other words, like, you know, you get kind of wrapped up into the characters into the life of the characters, and you feel strongly sort of about their fate and stuff like that. And I think that those are probably, I would say, like, after Trailer Park Warlock, I felt like that was probably something that was a strength of mine. So play to your strengths, right? Like, play to what you know you're good at, and then sort of build. You can build on your weaknesses over time. And I think, you know, going back once again to something I referenced earlier, like, Ghibli films are a huge inspiration for me as an artist. Like, I just like Princess Mononoke is a movie that I've watched countless times. There are very few movies that I have. There are some, but it's not a lot, right? Like, I'm trying to think of like, I used to watch movies like over and over again when I was much younger, and then like as I got older, I kind of lost interest in doing that. But when I was younger, here are the movies that I watched pretty relentlessly, right? Kiki's Delivery Service, Princess Mononoke. I'm thinking, I did watch a lot of Castle in the Sky, but that one was not my biggest one. Metropolis, by the one that was directed by Rintaro. Akira. And then going outside of anime and sort of like veering around chronologically a little bit. when I was younger, I was really into this movie. I watched this movie nonstop for years, which was Independence Day. That movie is really cheesy now. It's like a kind of a cheesy sci-fi movie, but I love that movie. I loved like the ensemble cast. I loved the fact that it like focused on like all these different characters and sort of focused from so many different perspectives. Um, I loved like that it did have like a jokey side to it and yet had like also a serious storyline. Um, I really like the design and excuse me. I really love the designs of the ships, like the aliens, like all of it. I loved that movie as a kid. I It was one of my favorite movies. And then before that, very similar in terms of like how the cast was utilized and in terms of like how the script sort of worked together. Jurassic Park. That movie blew my mind as a child. It was probably Jurassic Park is probably like top 3 of the most influential films in my life. That was one of the few movies, probably the only movie actually, where I went to the theater like 6 times to see it. Like I was obsessed with that movie, and it happened to like land at like just the right time in my boyhood, where I was just like obsessed with dinosaurs anyway. And on top of that, like, state of the art special effects at that time. It's really interesting, too, I have to say, like, from my vantage point now, at 38 years of age, like, looking back and, like, at the time when Jurassic Park came out, I'm going to turn on, it's getting kind of dark outside. At the time when Jurassic Park came out, computer generated special effects were kind of a brand new thing, right? And that movie was almost largely sold on its special effects alone. Like nobody cared about the cast, nobody cared about, Spielberg's name being attached to it. Although, that has always been a big selling point for Jurassic Park movies, but what sold that movie, what brought everybody to the theater was that these kind of special effects had never been done before. And it's really interesting now, like, some 25 plus years later, like, nobody gives a crap about computer generated special effects. Like, in a sense, almost nobody gives a crap about special effects in general. It's either become so, like, commonplace, or like there's just been such a glut of it that, well, I don't even know if people care about movies anymore either. It's hard to know. I have days where I wonder. Anyway, point is, like, things change so much in such a relatively short span of time that it's just very interesting for me to look at that change and to look at sort of how tastes have changed too. So anyway, point being, Jurassic Park was a great movie for me, hugely influential movie. Just in terms of the overall, something that movie does, that Independence Day does, that a lot of those 90s movies do, is it kind of does have kind of like a buffet style of storytelling where you get a little bit of everything, right? You get some comedy, you get you get a bunch of action, you get like dinosaurs, special effects, blah blah blah. And all of it comes together in this appropriately well done bouquet of disaster, right? And I mean disaster as in like it's a disaster film for the most part, or a bouquet of spectacle, or whatever other kind of bouquet you want to call it. But It's a bouquet as opposed to a buffet. Other movies I really watched a lot as a kid. I mean Disney films. I like top Disney. Okay, top one, like the best, like my favorite Disney film for the longest time was The Lion King. Just absolutely loved that movie. Could not get enough of it. Um, I just think, looking back to like the way it was animated was just done so incredibly well. Um, songs, gotta love them. I don't know, like people aren't into musicals these days in the same way we were in the 90s. I think they're great. Often forgotten in, unfortunately, like I think a lot of people think musicals or having music, like having people break out into musical numbers in the middle of a movie is like cringe for some reason. And I'm just like, no, it's fun. Like that's what fun is called. Like that's having random absurd things happen in the middle of like a story is fun. That's why I like 90s movies, because they're fun and they're not too serious, and you're kind of allowed to um you're kind of allowed to just veg out for a little bit. And I think that's part of the reason why I liked a lot of those 90s Disney movies is like you could kind of just veg out and enjoy a musical number, enjoy a fun action scene, enjoy, top-notch animation in, I mean, DreamWorks is probably serving that function nowadays, it seems like. I don't really watch a lot of DreamWorks movies, but I mean, the kids apparently love them these days. Like, I don't know if this is DreamWorks, but like those troll movies, apparently they do incredibly well. And those are musicals, as far as I'm aware. So I guess musicals haven't gone away. I'm just being an old man right now. Beauty and the Beast is also a pretty good one. That's a good one. If you want to go older, Robin Hood, very good. Sword in the Stone, very good. Alice in Wonderland, very good. One that I watched a lot as a kid, but didn't really put a lot of I don't know, respect into was Cinderella. And I actually went back and watched I think it was made in the 40s, that animated Cinderella, and it's like, I mean, beautifully animated, first of all. Musical numbers are great, just everything about it is really good. That's a really good Disney movie. One that I was kind of surprised I didn't like was Sleeping Beauty. Like it's gorgeously animated. It's such a beautiful movie, and the musical numbers are good, but like it's just boring. Like it's just like it's so like Aurora is just like a boring character. Um, the majority of the plot is largely sort of lifted on her fairy godmother's just screwing around, which like some of that stuff's pretty funny, but that was about it, in terms of how that movie carries itself. Just not a strong one. Not a strong Disney movie in my opinion. And then on top of that, like the other stuff that I would watch, and I'm sort of not counting these as movies, but super influential for me as a kid was like Looney Tunes cartoons. I watched. I mean, I watched as many as I could just like devour, right? And what it was too was like, so I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house as a kid because they were retired, and so like they would my grandparents on my mom's side, like they were retired, so like they could watch me and my sister during the summer or like, school days when we were off while my parents worked. And grandparents being grandparents, they like to spoil us, and so like largely what we did when we hung out at their house was like eat insane amounts of sugar. Just absolutely like degenerate. Just it was so ridiculous how much sugar I ate as a child when I was at their house. And then just like watch Disney movies until I collapsed, or like Looney Tunes or whatever. Just that was all I did. That was all I did all day long. And then my parents would come and pick me up, and then back to the NES. Or well, I think that was back to the Super Nintendo, I should say. Back to trying to beat Mega Man X. A game that took me forever to beat. I was not a very good gamer as a child. I'm still not really. I don't think I've ever really been a good gamer. Like, I've beaten games, but they were all games that were, like, kind of designed to be beaten with, I don't know, not necessarily minimal effort, but, like, not that much effort, comparatively to, like, the arcade type stuff, or, like, the Ninja Gaidens, or the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, those kind of games where it's just like you have to devote yourself to beating them. You have to put in homework basically to beat them. And there's only one game in my life that I've ever devoted myself to beat in that fashion, and that game was Star Fox 64. I didn't just beat it. Like, I unlocked everything. I just did everything I could possibly do in that game because I was obsessed with it. I have to say, like, in terms of games that are my favorite games ever, Star Fox 64, top-notch video game. One of the best. So I don't know. I'm just going through, like, I guess that's what I've made the stream into today. Is I'm just sort of going into what were things that influenced me, right? Sort of like what informs my character design, what informs my writing sensibilities. Because the thing is like, I think when artists want to talk about their influences, they get kind of choosy and curate it in such a way where they make it look like, oh yes, it was always, it was always this thing or that thing, and it's always the thing that they know is like an easy sell for an audience to like be like, yes, I also agree with that thing. That thing is the best thing. It's like, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of things like that, like Ghibli movies. Like you say, oh yes, I like Ghibli movies. To literally anybody, they're like, oh yes, I too like Ghibli movies. And sometimes it gets a little like, it gets a little. I'll just say it's a little too easy, because the reality is like everybody has junk that they like too, quote unquote junk. Like everybody has something that like is not that popular that they love, they absolutely love, but like nobody else loves it. Um, and I have a lot of that. I have a lot of things that are influential for me that like, pretty much are very few people at this point have either read or watched or enjoyed or didn't find it enjoyable. And for me, just absolutely, all of it is pivotal and influential. So I'm just trying to think through that list, because I can already tell that like there's some stuff that I curated when I was talking about it with y'all. like for sure curate it out. Like another favorite game of mine, Kirby's Dream Course. People don't talk about that one too often. Really fun game if you like puzzle games. I mean, it's basically a puzzle game. It's golf, but it's not really golf. It's not. Um, there was a game I played recently that kind of reminded me of Kirby's Dream Course, but it wasn't quite it. And it was a Discord game, and I can't remember what it was called. It was called like Putt Party or something like that. It was like Mini Golf Party, something like that. Anyway, I liked that game reminded me of Kirby's Dream Course. It implemented certain aspects to it that made it a little too chaotic. And that kind of took me out of the game a little bit, but I still had fun. But it was like more of a party game design, which is to say super chaotic, like skill kind of goes out the window a little bit because, you know, certain like anything goes kind of a thing. And I get it. There are people who love party games, and for reasons that I think are totally valid, because they're great ways to start conversations. I've definitely had some amazing times playing some party games with friends. However, they are not like the thing that they don't influence me. I don't know if that's a good thing or not though. As I'm thinking about it, it's like, is being influenced by a piece of media a good thing? Like, is that the thing that, like, does that make it a good thing? I know it makes it an influential thing. I know it makes it a thing that we go, oh, wow, that's really cool. But, like, is it a good thing? Like, smoking can be, like, an influential thing for a lot of people. Can I get where I'm going with this? I don't know. Those are the kind of things I think about every once in a while where I'm just like, some skeptical part of my brain wants to go like, I don't know. Is this a good thing? But, you know, when it comes to like Looney Tunes or older Disney movies, I'm not going to besmirch their influence on me. So, like, ultimately, all that intellectual wizardry, it's kind of a waste of energy, I think. Beefcat says, I have this on in the background listening, but did you imply that the Kirby golf game was your favorite one? That game rolled. It is one of my favorite ones. It's, like I said, it's up there with Star Fox 64. That game is really good. And that's one of the few games where, like, I could pop it in and play it anytime and not be bored. Even though there were courses that I played, like, a million times over, I still didn't get bored with them because, like, it was a game that really rewarded replays, right? Because if you got good enough, it's like, oh, you know, there is a way feasibly to score a hole in one on most, if not all, courses. I never got anywhere near that, but I did have stretches where I was like, oh, I can, like, pretty much hole in one all of the first course. And then, you know, like it really like staggered off right into course 2, course 3. Varb says, if skill doesn't matter in party games, then how come I've beaten you every time in Putt Party? Well, that's because you're a Varb, Varb. You're good at everything. That might just be a quality that you have. Beefcat says, I never really find folks who are aware that game even exists. I'm glad you do. I love Kirby and saw it in a pawn shop in the 90s and ended up getting it. Yeah, it's like I was saying, and as you're sort of responding to Beefcat, yeah, it is like a lot of people slept on it and I mean, you know, sad is a strong word. Like, and not sad about it. It's just like, people are missing out on that game a little bit. Like, I think that there's some really good game design stuff going on in it. It's also sort of going back to Putt Party, as Varb was referring to. It has like insane replayability to it, which I also saw with Putt Party. And I think it was like this really good match. It was like this perfect match, I would say, Kirby's Dream Course, of like skill to replayability to like there's just enough randomness that every playthrough feels a little fresh. And I think that's really like my comment on Putt Party for Varb is that I think the chaos factor in it is a little higher than I'm comfortable with or that I prefer. Oh, thanks, camera. You just zoomed out for no reason. But I'm also an old man, so don't take my criticisms too seriously. I'm not really old, but I'm older. And my tastes are influenced by, you know, Super NES games, which I'm finding that don't have the same kind of influence today that they did previously. I think what's influencing game designs more these days, and I'm speaking very much from a somewhat detached viewpoint. What's influenced a lot of video game design lately seems like is more towards like smartphone game design, which is to say like there's a higher amount of randomness. There's still skill, because as Varb pointed out, he did beat me every time in Putt Party. I'm not going to deny that. But there is a much higher degree of randomness to it. And I think that is largely informed by mobile phone game design, which tends towards being a little more random, a little more like there's almost like a slot machine quality to it a little bit. For me, for my preferences, that can be a turnoff a little bit. Because, I mean, if I want to go play slots, I'll go to the casino. Beefcat asks, I have no idea what Putt Party is. Is it a Discord game? That's what Google showed me. Yeah, it's a Discord game, Beefcat. It's actually, I was very impressed by it. I was kind of surprised when we played it because it's like a very well designed game. And you get into it like it's not very complicated to get into. It's pretty self-explanatory, and it's a multiplayer game. So it's sort of like simultaneous multiplayer Kirby Dream Course, which is a pretty good way of selling it, I feel like, because it does have elements of Kirby's Dream Course to it, where you do a little bit of puzzle solving. It's just the physics of it. So, like, I guess the best way I would put it is like the physics of Dream Course work in such a way where you can kind of math out where you feel like things are going to go. And Putt Party feels like you have to be more intuitive about how you determine your shots. But I could be very. This is just my like perception of it on like a couple of playthroughs. In I'm trying to remember what I was saying. Putt party. Yeah, it's a good time spent with friends. It's a good way to spend about 30 minutes just like goofing around. Because so here's the other thing with putt party is like it is more multiplayer focused. Obviously, because it's a Discord game, it probably should be more multiplayer focused. So like all of the items that you use are largely used to disrupt your opponents, right? So you kind of there's a lot of trolling each other and stuff. There's a lot of here's what I'll say. I actually really enjoyed the course design in that game, but the disruption items sort of screw up a lot of the like beauty and eloquence in my mind of like trying to sort of solve the courses because they're so like random and so like difficult to do anything about a lot of times that it sort of feels like you don't have any sort of choice in what you can do. You're just sort of like, well, I'm screwed. But that can be really fun in its own way, right? If you're playing in a party, if you're playing with like 4 people and you just like want to play a party game, right? That's what it's designed for, and it does it really well. Like I said, I'll play party games. I enjoy them. I'll get into them, and I got into playing it too. It's just that as a game, I do like to have some sort of feeling that because I know Barb's going to hold me to the fire on what I say on this. When I play it, I want to feel some amount of agency in what I'm doing. And I did feel that at times, but at other times it felt like as a player you had very little agency as to like what happened. Because any of the other players could just use like a disruption item and it would make it sort of pointless as to what your choices were, other than like use another disruption item, right? So it's just like a different design principle. And it's a fun one. I will admit it's a fun one. And as far as party games go too, like I kind of would prefer that to I don't like I'm trying to what is the name of it? What is the name of it? It's still fun, but it's like just not my favorite. It's like Jack in the Box or whatever, or Jackbox. I can't remember what it's called. Varb says we played one course that was literally a casino too, right? Yeah. So I mean, that's the thing is like, game design principles have changed a lot from, from way back in the yonder times. And some of it for good and some of it, I don't feel as hot about, right? And that could just be my preferences because that's what I grew up with. Because I grew up with, NES games, because I grew up with like Super Mario Brothers 3, or because I grew up with Ninja Gaiden or Battletoads, or like, Varb says Jack in the Box. Yes, I never played, but I've heard of it. It's fun. It's a but it's a different kind of game, right? It's like it's more of a like trolling around with your friends, like coming up with jokes kind of a game. It's not like a skill or outwitting kind of a game, although there is a lot of like social deduction aspects to it. That's really fun. It is also a time well spent. It just kind of depends on how you want to spend your time, right? And there's like a bajillion different Jack in the Box variants, and they all have like different sort of ideas and concepts. But the general idea is just like you trying to guess what your friends will find funny. That's the best way that I would describe sort of like how those games work. Which, like I said, that's a great fun way to spend an evening. Especially if you have an evening where like we just want to stay up till the wee hours of the morning and just laugh our ass off, kind of a thing. But yeah, just like I also don't know if I would say that older game design principles are necessarily um like better. And that was kind of my point when I was talking earlier about like sort of like looking back and going over like, okay, this is what I liked when I was younger, and this is the sort of stuff that I'm still looking for now as I'm older, right? Like the kind of games that I've been playing lately tend towards being like arcade style bullet hell shooters or like beat 'em ups, and it's because they're simple games to get into, and I don't spend any more than like 30 minutes to an hour playing them because I don't really have like 3 hours a night to invest in a game. So I want to get more out of my game, right? And I've found that bullet hell shooters tend towards giving me a lot more out of a very small chunk of time. So like a game like Mushihime-sama is really fun. Dodonpachi is really fun. Death Smiles, that's a really good one. Those are all good bullet hell shooters. I just recently got into a beat 'em up called Fight and Rage that's really good. It's very like as far as beat 'em ups go, it's very technical. So like you can do a lot of different combos and stuff. And the game does a lot to like invite you to learn combos and like sort of develop your play style. Um, Another one that I really enjoy but didn't I played about 10 hours of and then kind of put away was Double Dragon Gaiden. That's really good too, and it's like kind of has like a roguelike aspect to it in that like you can upgrade your character as you go through your playthrough. My only issue with Double Dragon Gaiden is it's like kind of on the long side, and its difficulty curve is a little crunchy, I guess. But I say this as somebody who has played like a lot of, you know, back in the day, played a lot of quarter munching type arcade games. Some of them I would still recommend, some of them I wouldn't. Like I still have a fond memory of like the X-Men arcade game because I played the hell out of it. Never, I think I beat it once with a couple of friends, but like in order to beat it, like we just, you know, I think we put a good $20 in the change machine and just, walked over to the cabinet with this bucket of quarters and just was like, we're gonna beat it, come hell or high water. So that's about how much it costs to like beat that game. Is about $20. At least for us. Like I have heard people say allegedly that you can skillfully beat those games. So kind of going back to Varb's original sort of conceit. Arguably, there are a lot of games in the past that also had some of those things that I was complaining about previously. So there are a lot of arcade games where, yes, you skillfully could discount how much money you spent on beating that arcade game, but it was very difficult to like, do that on a single continue. Some games you can do that. I don't know. I don't believe that you could do that with X-Men. That game was just ridiculously like unfair, basically. So, I guess in a sense, it's like the main design principles that have sort of changed in a lot of ways is that in the past there were a lot of games that were designed on the principle of like, we're just going to be difficult in a way that is like just not fair to the player at all. Like Dark Souls is refreshing in that it is difficult, but it is difficult in a way where if you just devote your time to it, you will beat it. There were some of these arcade games where I don't think you were ever going to beat it. Beefcat says, I never in my life could get into those types of games. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES and Turtles in Time maybe, but any side-scrolling beat 'em up always felt it was there to eat through lives. Yeah, a lot of them are that way. And I have to say, like, the one thing I do skillfully beat it. Like, it is possible. Whereas, name your like side-scrolling beat 'em up from the 90s, like The Simpsons side-scrolling beat 'em up, just completely, quarter munching. That Avengers one, that was actually kind of fun, but like super difficult. A lot of those games, just like there's not a lot of hope. But I did enjoy them. I really enjoyed both of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle side-scrolling beat 'em ups. Not just Turtles in Time, but like that original one. I don't think there's any other name for it, just Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? And it's the one that they ported over to the NES, I think. I'm trying to remember what system I played it on. I think it was on the NES. It was basically the same game, but, with worse graphics. But yeah, those Konami designed beat 'em ups were pretty brutally hard and like a lot of times just rude, like for lack of a better word. Beefcat says, yeah, I call it NES. It was originally arcade, IRC. Yeah, so like I like that game a lot. And I like Turtles in Time a lot. But, I don't know if I liked them enough that I would go back to play them. Like Kirby's Dream Course, I probably would go back to play it. It was that good of a game. And I know that like both the original Star Fox and SNES and Star Fox 64 I go back to play every once in a while. Beefcat says, I know the first level better than I know U.S. geography just because I played it so many times. See, I have made this statement about I've made this statement with Pokemon. If I could understand the like periodic table of elements as well as I understood Pokemon Red and Blue, like I could make anything. I could be a biomolecular chemist if I wanted to, but I never quite learned it that well. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean by that. That's how I am with Star Fox 64. I know like every map of that game by heart. Like I just like I know it in almost a religious sense where I'm just like I am in line with the Tao of Star Fox 64. And those are the kind of games, I mean, I do enjoy having that kind of relationship with a game. I don't know if that's healthy to do at this age, but like I do enjoy that. And so I think that's why I've been getting into more of the bullet hell shooter type games because the time frame's so short, right? It's like, yeah, if I die, it's only going to be after like if I have to do the continue screen, it's only after like 5 to 10 minutes of playing a game out of a 30-minute total game, right? And I've noticed that I get much better and I'm much faster. So like, for example, Mushihime-sama was one that kicked my ass so many times, and then now I'm getting to the point where I'm just about to beat the game on a single credit. And it was after about I don't know, it's probably about 15 playthroughs, and like each playthrough was probably no more than about 15 to 20 minutes. So like for maybe not for my money, I'm getting as much out of the game, but for my time, I am getting a lot out of it. Beefcat says, I miss those types of games that have multiple level exits where the game branches off so much. Star Fox 64 ruled because of that. Yeah, that's it's really weird to me that more games aren't doing that. Like, especially nowadays, since the technology is there for it. Like, because at the time, like so going back to Star Fox 64 in particular, like you could have a completely different game every playthrough, and I always thought that was really cool. And like, I don't know why that never, I don't know, like became more popular or like took off more than it did, because like pretty much that game was about it. I think there are a couple other games, but I can't. Like, off the top of my head, I couldn't name you any other than Star Fox 64 right now. But, like, there are some RPGs, right, like, that have multiple endings, but not really branching paths, right? They don't necessarily need it, because, like, the game that comes to the top of my head is, like, Chrono Trigger, which doesn't really have branching paths. It just has a point in the story where you can kind of do whatever you want in terms of how you figure out how to beat the game from there on. Final Fantasy VI, another like version of that idea, right? But in terms of like kind of arcade style games, or like I don't know, like platformers, I can't think of anything right now that did anything like that. Because like I said, here's what I like so much about, I've already kind of talked about it, but like Star Fox 64 did this incredibly good job of melding storyline and gameplay in this like perfect, in my mind anyway, perfect cohesion. Varb says, big developers aim for rich people who play a game a few times and buy the next one. Small developers don't have resource for that, so they use other cheaper / easier replayability additions. For sure. No, I agree. See, this is it's a really interesting thing that you're throwing out there, Varb. Because you're making a good point about like sort of like what are the motivations for how developers approach designing a game. And I think from the context of like the Nintendo 64 era, at that time you didn't have the same sort of diversity of venues, right, that you could publish a game on. I mean, Steam has like changed the way that like games are made and put out there. Not just Steam, but also like the Google Play Store, the Apple Play Store, or whatever. All that's changed sort of like the ways that you do that. So in some sense, there are now like more varieties of games than ever before that you could play, right? And it is dependent on your price point. So like small developers do, in a lot of sense, cater towards often smaller price points, but also like people who might want a little more what's the word, like negotiation, right, and how involved they want to be in the game. Beefcat says, except if you're Nintendo, they're hell bent on making another they're hell bent on making another good Star Fox sequel. Or not making it, I meant. They are definitely hell-bent on never making another good Star Fox sequel. I don't know what their problem is. And it really upsets me because I feel like that property is my favorite Nintendo property, and they hate it. Like, they just They despise it. They want to not involve themselves with it as much as possible, and I can't figure out why. Um, it's like kind of comedic how much they don't like Star Fox. But yeah, kind of going back to my what I was originally saying in regards to 64. Like my thing about 64 was it was this perfect melding and this perfect cohesion of gameplay and story where you get kind of a different story on every playthrough, and you don't have to pay attention to the story at all if you don't want to, which I really like. I personally like. I enjoy being able to have a playthrough where I don't pay attention to the story, and then having a playthrough where I can pay attention to it, and it doesn't necessarily intensely affect my ability to play the game. So like if I have to pay attention to something somebody said to go to a particular locale, that turns me off more than anything in any game. And I mean, this is like every JRPG does this. Like every RPG does this, where you have to pay attention to the dialogue. This is why I've gotten out of RPGs over time, is because I just like when I'm playing a game, there's a part of my brain I want to turn off, and that part that I want to turn off is the like heavy like paying attention to context clues or paying attention to like dialogue kind of stuff. And what I want to turn on is like reflex, like awareness to game mechanics, things like that. But that's just my design principles, right? Like different, or not principles, but like design interests, right? Different people like the paying attention to dialogue trees and and in boxes and stuff. And that just like a great infamous example of that, or not infamous, but just like a great example of that is like BioWare games like Mass Effect, which are fun, but are for me too involved. Like I don't want to like I don't want to think about like my relationships with as the player. I don't want to think about my relationships with the other characters that much, which is which maybe relates to why I like Star Fox 64 so much, because you can very easily neglect the characters in that game, and but the game does a good job of also more so like rewarding you or like giving you reason to want to pay attention to your characters and making sure they don't die. I think I don't know. I'm kind of stopping myself for a second because I think I was gonna talk outside of my experience level because I'm not that experienced with Mass Effect as a game. But it seemed like the kind of game where if if a character died in the game, they didn't like perma die, right? Whereas in 64, they didn't necessarily perma die, but it did negatively impact what routes you could take. It negatively impacted like whether or not you were going to have support for later levels. And so, once again, this might be a design feature in Mass Effect, and I just don't know. So, correct me if you want. But my point is sort of like different priorities. So, like for people who are really into Mass Effect, what they like about it is what's prioritized is your emotional attachment to the game, or your emotional attachment to the characters, right? Whereas in Star Fox 64, yeah, you do get emotionally attached, but the priority is more on what is their function, right? Because if you don't have Slippy on your team, you don't have a health bar when you fight the boss. Like that is a direct like consequence of you neglecting to save Slippy, and maybe you don't because Slippy's super annoying, right? Like there are reasons. Beefcat says, I get you 100%. There are games that have hit me like a ton of bricks, but 99% of the time, I just much rather skip dialogue and just play the game. Playing Sekiro right now, and I honestly to God couldn't tell you what's happening. Yeah, I've done that. I've done that on a couple of games. I actually had that happen in Hades. Like, I really like the way that Hades is designed as a roguelike. I could not care at all. I cannot care at all about what's going on in the story. I just don't care. I really don't care about what's going on in the characters. They like ask you to know so that you can find, particular corridors or like, um, special items and stuff. And it's like, oh, you need to bring this item to this character, and I'm just like, I don't. Can I just go back in the dungeon to fight? Like that's why I got this game. But people like those character aspects, and I'm not gonna like knock them for it, but I don't like it. It's not like I'd rather play a game like Scourgebringer, where there's like 2 seconds of story and it's all just fighting. It's just like you just fight and then you beat the game and then you feel good. Like that's my that's how I want to spend that time playing a video game. And the other thing I do like about Hades too, it is another game where you can put usually playthroughs of that are no more than an hour, which I really like. That's what I like about roguelikes in general is like you can do a good hour playthrough and get a good chunk of game. And even if you die, you feel pretty accomplished, if you like, oh, I got a lot farther on that path than I thought I would, or like, oh, that was a really interesting combination of like items and skills that I got, you know. But I just could not get myself into the story of that game. But I see a lot of people, or I remember seeing a lot of people who really got into the story in that game and really got into the characters. And God bless them. That's all I can like, because I know that the people who designed that game put a lot of work into that, put a lot of work into crafting the story for it, put a lot of work into like figuring out all the character dynamics and stuff. That just was not what brought me into it. And I guess that's my loss ultimately, but like that's not really my, like I said, it's just not it's not what originally brought me into video games as a kid. And as I've gotten older, I guess my video game predilections have gotten more towards how I was when I was a kid. Like I was really into story in games when I was a teenager, but like that faded off. Beefcat says, yeah, I honestly believe roguelikes are my favorite genre as I grow older, mostly because of the views you're discussing. I can just throw it on and do a few runs. Yeah, I mean, roguelikes are almost like, they are almost like an evolution of sort of beat 'em up style arcade quarter muncher type gameplay, but it's more forgiving. Beefcat says, not to have to worry about the story is easier on just turning my worries off. Right. Exactly. Uh, exactly. So I mean, I do think a lot of it can do with sort of the age you are when you're playing a game, because I think this is my theory. So if you're a teenager, you might be more interested in playing a game that has like a deeper focus on like the characters and on the storyline and the world and like the more social aspects, because it allows you to like interact with those things. And at that age, you're already sort of like trying to figure out social dynamics anyway. So like it's a great way of sort of like getting through your high school anxieties and apprehensions of stuff by like virtualizing those interactions in a game. Whereas it might be like I'm just spitballing here, but like as an adult, it is possible that for a lot of adults, you get to this place where you're like, I just don't even want to think about society. I just want to beat up slugs or whatever. Like, and it's a healthier outlet than like going to the casino, right? Which I've seen a lot of. That's a path a lot of adults take, right? They're just like, well, I'm going to take out my frustrations and worries at the casino or at the blackjack table, and I'm going to try and win it big. Whereas I would rather just spend, the $20 to play like a beat 'em up and like turn my brain off for a little bit and then, return to life after that. And I think that is like in modern game design, that is the one thing that does really kind of bother me that I've seen become more of a trend is the introduction of more casino style game mechanics, if you want to call them game mechanics, where there is more emphasis on like randomness, but also just like, like the whole microtransactions thing, or like loot boxes, or like, like with mobile games are infamous for this, which is, you get a set number of times that you can play, and then if you want to continue playing, like you either buy some package or like buy something that allows you to extend your playtime. It's kind of an evolution of like design mechanics, but it's not really like, I wouldn't say it's like a good evolution necessarily. Um, like I would almost rather I would almost rather there be a quarter slot in my smartphone than like having to pony up like a credit card and like buy the weird carnival ticket package thing. I don't know. So I don't really play a lot of those types of games. I only have one on my phone right now. Well, I have two, but the only one that I actually like actively will play sometimes is like a mahjong game. But other than that, like I don't really. Mobile game design like makes me sad. it it's it's so cynical in its design principles that I kind of just don't download like hand or mobile games that often at all, if at all, right? Like I said, the one that I did recently play is a mahjong game, and that's just because I like mahjong. But like, whew, I don't know. I see commercials or I see ads for other games while playing through that mahjong game, and it is depressing because it's like, oh, here's the exact same game, but like we changed the skins or the template on the characters, but it's basically the exact same game. We've like a slightly different motif or like a slightly different like whatever, but this is ostensibly the same game. Like I don't feel like I saw anything that cynical even in like the arcade quarter munching era of game design. Like there's maybe a couple of games like that, but like I don't think I've ever like what I see on mobile gaming just like it is it is incredible. Anyway, I am largely done with these pages, and I'm going to be coloring them tomorrow. I'm going to call it for today because I'm going to go catch up with some friends and play some board games in a second here and go deal with the brutal like Baton Rouge traffic. But I'm just going to fix something real quick. All right. Anyway. It's been good hanging out. I hope y'all have a good rest of your evening, a good day tomorrow. I may come back on to do like a drawing stream. I don't know. I might save that for tomorrow. We'll see. But until then, I hope y'all have a great evening. And I'm going to, right before we go, I want to just thank my Patreon members. So eternal gratitude goes to Troy Morris, Paul Rainwater. Special thanks to Pharmacist Judge, Leo Empire, Dark Link, GFY, Sudi Shearwater, Danielle Rainwater, Matt Walters, and John Durrett. But until then, y'all have fun. I'll talk to y'all later. And yeah, bye.